I'm sorry, guys. Muted once again. All right. Welcome to the Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissel, and today we are continuing our deep dive series into the Bermuda Triangle. And man, oh man, I gotta make sure I hit this sound button because I just said a whole bunch of stuff, and yeah. So I was telling a story yesterday. I went to the Volo Auto Museum. I spent about 4 hours there, and when I was getting close to leaving, I had to go use the bathroom, and I just went past all these booths real quick, and there was this one booth on the corner. It had a dresser, and I I saw a book, and I picked it up and I bought it after looking at it for a little bit. It's the Great Lakes Triangle by Jay Gorley. Now, in this book, it has right in the front a reference to the book we are currently reading. Meaning, this book used this book as source material. So technically, I was asking before I realized I was muted. I was asking everyone, like, should we read this book here or start its own deep dive series? I'm kind of leaning towards having its own deep dive series. But once we finish this book, we're going to have to move on to something else. And they're kind of related, but it probably would be better if we separate it. But I thought it was really awesome. Like, I'm really picky about the books that I purchase. And when I flipped to the front and I saw this, all the acknowledgments here from Aliens from Space, The Bermuda Triangle by Charles Berlitz. It's the second book written down on this. The UFO Experience, Scientific Inquiry, From the Edge of Reality, Ghost Ship. So it's saying from, because he reprinted some, whatever were in these. Ghost Ships of the Great Lakes, Great Stories of the Great Lakes, and Inland Seas. So there's another really good list of books that this author used to create this. And there's a second Great Lakes Triangle book that I found my mouse is hovering. I'm about to purchase it. The Gateway to Oblivion. And it also covers the Great Lakes Triangle. So chances are I will do a different, like a new series covering this book, since it's a different body of water. But I could just read this here, but I don't want to muddy it up too much. I want to keep it on topic to strictly the Bermuda Triangle. And since we're getting close to the end of this book, I'd say like in the next 2 or 3 weeks we'll be moving on to other material. But yeah, I thought this was so cool. I didn't even know this was a thing a few years ago, and then I heard it here, about it here and there, and I figured I'll get around to it someday. And now here we are. I'm gonna be reading this book on this channel, and yeah, most likely it will be a separate deep dive series. And this one's a lot closer to home for me. I mean, this triangle is Bermuda Triangle is about 1,000 miles away from me. This is about 20 to 50 miles away from me. So there's a lot more interest in this to know what's going on. But I've only been to Lake Michigan. I haven't been to any of the other Great Lakes up in the north here, Midwest, North Midwest. So today we have chapter 7 to finish, and I believe there's like roughly 10 pages left. Yeah. Yeah, a little less than that. So we'll get started here shortly. I just wanted to give a little update on my outings yesterday and the fact that this book caught my eye. It was just the only book sitting it was like sitting like this on a shelf, like about this height for me. So like I just was like in passing going to use the washroom. And here this thing was. So I grabbed this and now it's here with me and we're going to get into it. We're going to see what this is all about. But this will be a different deep dive. I might actually do this for Fridays. Now that I had a little time to think about it. I do want to let everyone know that Saturday will be on schedule. We have the Flickering Empire book that we're reading on Saturday mornings. And we're getting pretty far into it. It's a boom and bust cycle for the Chicago film industry. It's basically what we're covering. How it started, and then everyone just spread out, and this place just kind of lost all of its roots, like its foundations. All of the people that founded their film companies moved and scattered throughout the U.S. But so there's Saturday's show, and Sunday the Let's Talk About It episode 4. That's also on schedule, so be here. Probably won't be as long as this past Sundays, but we'll be there to chill and just talk about things, just decompress. And Tuesday, we will be continuing the deep dive into Coral Castle. I am expecting the Bruce Cathy book to arrive tomorrow. That's what the tracking is saying. So, just waiting on that, and I'll put a message out as a post on the channel here, because I think you guys get notifications when I make a post, and it's kind of like a status update for the channel. I like that you guys are able to see that, so I'll try to start using that more frequently as just like little updates. Like, yes, we're going to be doing this, or if any development happens, I'll just make a post instead of like a video update. But just for a quick reminder again, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And then very soon, we'll be doing Fridays with this bad boy. So, not sure where exactly we left off on this page here, but we'll get started real shortly. Hope you're all having a good week so far. Yeah, and thank you, Zenray. I did notice right before you mentioned something about the audio here. I keep myself muted during the intro, and I end up just not unmuting. This time I just completely forgot to click it. Other times I think I clicked it and it didn't click. So, more technical difficulties. Oh, by the way, well, one of the number one pro wrestling show or company by numbers, the World Wrestling Federation. I was watching Raw from this past Monday, and they had microphone checks they were doing while they were live on air. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. They were doing this while the match was going on. So everyone has these technical difficulties. But so I hope this is a lot clearer and bigger for you to see. I really tried to up the resolution here. So we'll be starting on page 126. There's one drawing in here. And we will begin. So I might have read a few of these first sentences, but just so that we get a little refresher here. There was really no break point in this chapter, and I really was trying to stop at a good point. I just had to pick and choose. So, all right, let's begin. I'm just gonna start from the page before because there's a paragraph here. So we looked at this prior. Here's a rendering of the triangle. This is Cuba here, and up there at the very corner, that's Florida. So it was just showing another diagram. Saying estimated landmass is formed by the present Bahama Islands, Cuba, and Florida prior to the ending of the last glaciation. So yeah, that's a lot more. That's a lot closer together than it is today. That's just showing how that all came about here, or what they believe it looked like before the glaciers melted, if that's even true. Because we have to question what we've been told with all of this. Like millions of years and glaciers carving out the Midwest. Yeah, okay. I don't know. None of us know, do we? We're all here to find answers. The present islands are shown with their former shapes. Florida, it will be noted, extended far west into the Gulf of Mexico. Dark area in the middle of the landmass formed by the present Andros, Exuma, Eleuthera, and New Providence Islands is the deep ocean canyon called the Tongue of the Ocean. The sea at the time formed great island bays in the Bahamas, including the present Exuma Sound and the Tongue of the Ocean. So one more time for all you to see here. You know what? I'm going to make it bigger. Hold on here. There we go. You know, I think the resolution on this webcam is great, but Logitech really needs to figure out the focus feature on this. It's never really picking up what I'm putting here. Alright. So I'm assuming Bahamas, Cuba on the bottom here, and Florida, which is apparently extended into the Gulf of Mexico at one point. And I mean, if we look at all of the other stuff, like this, we're seeing that there was a bunch of land that eroded, and Zen actually, in the chat here, he mentioned to me, he showed me a video, sent me a video link about what was it, Dutch Since. And I actually followed that channel before. He's an earthquake researcher, where he goes and reports on the various quakes happening on the fault lines. And he was discovering a lot of sunken, or not, I don't know if you say sunken, but underwater structures, like there used to be cities on these seafloors. And that's not something unusual from what we've been covering here. Like the spears going and take, like, sticking out of the water, or just barely sticking out of the water, and going like 60 feet down to the floor. Like, there's something happened here, and we don't know what. Or if some people do know, then they're definitely not telling us. So let me get this image back up here for you. Yeah, I like that this is a little bit bigger. All right. So, all right, let's get into the book now. We'll get this all going. Hey, Woo Rider, good to see you, and thank you for your sentiment. I know we need to focus on our we need to keep our priorities in focus, I guess is what I should say. So today's Bermuda Triangle. That is the only subject today. And I like keeping it compartmentalized like that. So, all right, we'll continue. And there's only one other illustration here, and I will show that when it comes up. That's near the end. All right. The most celebrated of the finds has been the Bimini Road, or Wall, first discovered in 1968 by Dr. J. Manson Valentine, with divers Jacques Mayol, Harold Climo, CLIMO, and Robert Angove, first seen from a boat on the surface of the water. When the sea was especially clear and without surface movement, it was, in the words of Dr. Valentine, quote, an extensive pavement of rectangular and polygonal flat stones of varying size and thickness, obviously shaped and accurately aligned to form a convincingly artifactual arrangement. These stones had evidently lain submerged over a long span of time, for the edges of the biggest ones had become rounded off, giving the blocks the domed appearance of giant loaves of bread or pillows. Some were absolutely rectangular, sometimes approaching perfect squares. Yeah, these were machined. These had to have been. Or they were poured into molds, and then the rock was solidified. That's the only way I could... that's how probably Egypt and all of these megalithic structures were built. And if... Coral Castle... We don't know how he did that still. We're still trying to figure that out. But one of the theories is that he also used liquid to turn into stone. But that's a little more far-fetched since we see the rock bed that he worked with there. Whereas with the Bermuda Triangle here, we have these people discovering this stuff on the seabed. Now, why would it be on the seabed unless it was above water at some point? So, let's continue. One remembers that absolutely straight lines are never present in natural formations. Yeah. I'd agree with that. Absolutely straight lines are never present in natural formations. Very simple. Yeah, especially if you see 90-degree angles. It's not anything that water flow would have did. The larger pieces, at least 10 to 15 feet in length, ran often the width of parallel-sided avenues, while the small ones formed mosaic-like pavements covering broader sections. The avenues of apparently fitted stones are straight-sided and parallel. These literally are roads and walls. The avenues of apparently fitted stones are straight-sided and parallel. The long one is a clear-cut double series interrupted by two expansions containing very large, flat stones propped up at the corners by vertical members, like ancient dolmens of Western Europe. And the southeast end of this great roadway terminates in a beautifully curved corner. The three short causeways of accurately aligned large stones are of uniform width and end in cornerstones. Quote, from the air, one can dimly make out under their blanketing of dark algae the huge individual stones that precisely border the margins of this geological and archaeological challenge. Sorry. I'm going to reread that because I kind of skipped over a few words. Quote, from the air one can dimly make out, under their blanketing of dark algae, the huge individual stones that precisely border the margins of this geological or archaeological challenge. End quote. The first underwater discoveries in Bimini have come under considerable attack from geologists and archaeologists, some of who have not visited the site, but recent findings that the gigantic construction makes a turn and appears at other places on the ocean bottom, as if it once ran around Bimini and beyond, indicate the increasingly apparent size and ramifications of this enormous structure. This was an ancient highway. What else can you call it? The purpose of which we can, as yet, only guess. So they had no idea where it came from or how it was made, or when it was built. The discoverer has expressed his personal feelings. Quote, the suggestion that the stones represent the remnants of walls, roads, or even an ancient seaport are unacceptable at the present time because it has not yet been established what, if anything, besides bedrock, lies below. However, recent observations in slightly deeper water have verified multi-layered construction in at least one area. Absolutely fascinating. My personal feeling is that this entire complex represents the intelligent utilization by ancient man of materials provided by nature and appropriate for the creation of some sort of ceremonial center. In this connection, it should be remembered that certain ancient sacred sites, such as the Glastonbury Circle, 30 miles in circumference, and the designs of the Nazca Desert of Peru, of lines and images of mile-long animals, traceable only from the air because of their gigantic proportions, have virtually no point of reference with our modern technology, as the purposes of these majestic artifacts are incomprehensible to us. End quote. Exploratory overflights since 1968 have indicated other extraordinary and apparently man-made formations on the Bahama Banks, as well as on the sea bottom near Cuba and Haiti and Santo Domingo. Some of these appear to be pyramids or tremendous dome foundations, with one in the Bimini area measuring 180 by 140 feet, which may be the truncated top of a pyramid, and other larger pyramids or temple platforms reported out at sea. We're talking about pyramids in the circle now. Underwater. Within Cuban waters, a whole complex of reported underwater ruins is awaiting exploration, unless the Cubans themselves have already been there. And it says here, Castro is an enthusiastic scuba diver. Well, I have nothing good to say about him, other than they're part of the reason why I'm here. Two airplane pilots, Bob Brush and Trig Adams, on a 1968 flight in the vicinity of Andros Island, photographed a partitioned rectangle on the Andros Shelf. Divers later found the wall to be of stone, but there is no record of the original inhabitants or the later Spanish conquerors having built such constructions in that area, especially underwater. What seems to be an underwater road or wall running along the top of an underwater cliff has been located and photographed near Cay Lobos. It is possible that the ancient road ran along the cliff when both were above sea level. Perhaps the underwater sighting of steps carved in the continental shelf off northern Puerto Rico, reported by the French naval captain, I want to say Jorge Huot, Houot, and Lieutenant Gerard D. Froberville in the Bathyscaphe. This word is spelled Bathyskaphe. And then Archimedes. So this this Bathyscaphe is named Archimedes. It represented simply a staircase out in a rock cliff descending to the old sea level of 12,000 years ago. So let's reread that real quick. Perhaps the underwater sightings of steps carved in the continental shelf off northern Puerto Rico, reported by the French naval captains and lieutenants. It was simply a staircase out in a rock cliff descending to the old sea level. Off the coast of Yucatan, Mexico, numerous road causeways have often been seen from the air. They leave the shore in straight lines toward unknown underwater locations farther out at sea in deeper waters. While connecting causeways on land are visible because of the covering jungle, those underwater are still discernible from time to time as they are uncovered by currents or storms. What appeared to be an enormous underwater road, or a pavement that had previously been above water, was observed from the deep-diving submarine Illuminaut on a 1967 mission off Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. The road was apparently formed of or paved with manganese oxide, and when special wheels were installed on the Illuminaut, it was able to proceed along the road, which in some places reached a depth of 3,000 feet. As if the Illuminaut were a car driving along a normal road, except that the road was, in this case, at the bottom of the sea. The size of the paved surface was too large to suggest the conclusion that it had been man-made, as was also the case with a very extensive, quote, tiled, end quote, section of the ocean bottom observed by Dr. Bruce Heesen of the Lamont Observatory while making a deep dive in the Bahama area. Wow. So I wanted to look up what this manganese oxide. I'm not really too sure what this, so it's a transition metal. So manganese is a transition metal. It's solid, it's strongly acidic. and it is cubic, so it has crystal structure, or that's its crystal structure is cubic. So yes, it's man, what would you call this? So if you've ever seen any type of oxide, like iron oxide, this just looks like coal. Like what, coal roads? I don't know if that would be the case. Okay. But they had this Illuminaut. So I don't know if we saw a picture of that thing already. Let's see if I can bring that up. Yeah, we saw this picture of it already. Here, I'll pull it up from the book here and we'll just glance at it again. So this thing was driving on the bottom of the ocean on a road. This guy. That's the Illuminaut that we're talking about here. And it was able to move along on the floor, on the road. Okay. Continuing on. And I think I'm going to reread a sentence or two here. There are strong indications that a continental landmass existed in the Caribbean Sea, of which the islands and ridges of the Antilles may be the surviving mountain peaks. In 1969, a research expedition from Duke University studied the sea bottom of the Caribbean and conducted dredging operations at a number of places on the Aves Bridge, a ridge running along the eastern border of the oceanic Venezuelan basin between Venezuela and the Virgin Islands. So, just quickly, if some of you don't understand what dredging is, it's just they're grading the bottom of whatever body of water there is. They do that a lot with rivers. Sometimes they do that with lakes, but the most common thing I've heard of with dredging is with rivers. Because if you need to make a river wider, or there's heavier flow coming in, you're changing stuff around. The North Branch Chicago River was dredged so that it would flow the opposite way it was going. I believe now the water flows into Chicago and into Lake Michigan, and before it used to flow out of Lake Michigan and up through the North Branch Chicago River. And the reason they changed that at the time, like over 100 years ago, it was to stop the pollution from going up into the suburbs. That's really what it was. So they dredged the river and then they reversed the flow of it, which caused it to then empty out into what you know as the main Chicago River that goes past Trump Tower and all of that in the city of Chicago. And that empties out into Lake Michigan. Before, Lake Michigan used to empty out into the Chicago River, and it would go all the way up through northern Illinois. I don't know if it goes into Wisconsin or not. But, alright, let's continue here. So, on 50 occasions, granitic or acidic or acid igneous rocks were brought to the surface. Ordinarily, these rocks are found only on continents. So this would tell me there was land that's now under this water in the Atlantic that used to be connected to some of these other land masses. So whether you say North America or South America, wherever it was connected to one of the continents. And that's why these rocks exist there in the water that they found. A distinguished oceanographer, Dr. Bruce Heezen, in commenting on this matter, has observed, quote, up to now, geologists generally believed that light granitic or acid igneous rocks are confined to the continents and that the crust of the earth beneath the sea is composed of heavier, dark-colored basaltic rock. Thus, the occurrence of light-colored granitic rocks may support an old theory that a continent formerly existed in the region of the eastern Caribbean, that these rocks may represent the core of a subsided lost continent. So it could have also been a lost continent. And so after lost continent, end quote. It's all up in there. We don't have the answers here. This is just speculating, and I like giving some thought to all of this. Those aren't the words I wanted to say, but I gotta keep moving along here. It is on the underwater Bahama Plateau, however, that the area of the most concentrated incidents occurring within the Bermuda Triangle, that the most surprising discoveries of underwater remains have been made, and many of these at a depth of only a few fathoms. The submerged limestone formations of the Bahama Banks were largely above water about 12,000 years ago. This large land area contained bays and inland waterways which are now evident on depth maps as the deep parts of the ocean cutting in and around the Bahama Banks. This considerable land area formed at a time previous to the rising of the sea, a large island or islands which, if we are to believe the underwater remains, supported a complex culture. From 1968 to the present time, underwater discoveries have been made, especially near Bimini, of what seems to have been massive stonework on the present sea bottom, huge blocks of stone placed together in what may be roads, platforms, harbor works, or fallen walls. They strangely resemble the pre-Inca stonework of Peru. The pillars of Stonehenge, or the walls of Coral Castle, or the Cyclopean walls of the Minoan Greece. The age of the stones is uncertain, although fossilized mangrove roots, which had grown over the stones, have given carbon-14 datings of about 12,000 years. The most celebrated of the finds has been the Bimini Rotor Wall, first discovered in 1968 by Dr. J. Manson Valentine with divers, Jacques Mayol, Harold Climo, and Robert Angove. And this is the part we're rereading right now. It's only a few sentences here. First seen it from a boat on the surface of the water when the sea was especially clear and without surface movement, it was, in the words of Dr. Valentine, quote, an extensive pavement of rectangular and polygonal flat stones of varying size and thickness, obviously shaped and accurately aligned to form a convincingly artificial arrangement. These stones had evidently lain submerged over a long span of time, for the edges of the biggest ones had become rounded off, giving the blocks the domed appearance of giant loaves of bread or pillows. Some were absolutely rectangular, sometimes approaching perfect squares. One remembers that absolutely straight lines are never present in natural formations. Larger pieces, at least 10 to 15 feet in length, often ran the width of parallel-sided avenues, while the small ones formed mosaic-like pavements covering broader sections. Okay, there's way too much I'm rereading here for y'all. I don't know how I moved back on that other page like that. Okay, so we're on page 127 now, and I'm starting from the top up here. Oh, man. We got Jay here with the super chat. $10. Thank you, man. I don't know what to do with all this love. Thank you, Jay. You helped get this book, by the way. So we'll be doing a new deep dive series on the Great Lakes Triangle on Fridays. I haven't decided when we'll start this, but I do want to get into this. Wu says, wonder if the electromagnetic field causes disappearances. Imagine flying over Bermuda Triangle and end up in an alternate reality timeline of Earth, or maybe just jump back to the 1930s. Yeah, hey, that's exactly what I think is going on here. The different electromagnetic fields on certain parts of the land, and the ley line, like if the ley, I thought the ley lines were natural, starting going into all this stuff, and then we're being told the ley lines may be artificial because it is set up like a grid, and I mean that's more than chance that we have something that looks like a carbon molecule that's running at electromagnetics through the land that we live on, as well as under the ocean like that too. Man, thank you, Jay. Yeah, so what to do? What should we do here? I'm thinking if I should. We need to talk about the ley lines. We really do. There's ley lines that go through Denver, Colorado. There's also ley lines that go through Miami. There's ley lines that I think were really close to Homestead, where Ed Leeds Skolnick made his Coral Castle. And then there's obviously ley lines that go through the Bermuda Triangle here. And ley lines in general, I'll keep this short. Like they have been compared to videotape in functionality. Like if there's a very highly emotional, energized type of moment that happens with living beings, people, that gets recorded onto the land like a magnetic videotape. Makes sense to me. When you have rocks that have magnets in them, and it just makes sense with what's going on here. There's a lot of different elements into play with the water. I mean, you've got the salt water. How does that affect all of this? I do think there is time slips that happen with this, but we don't have accounts of like ships. We don't have like accounts of old ships seeing new ships or new ships seeing old ships. Like we don't have any of that type of stuff so far. Like we haven't uncovered any of that. I would like to find some of that because there's definitely evidence of time slips happening, and it's just it moves in like a fog and it leaves like a fog, or the fog passes and then you're in that time slip and then another fog comes through and then it's over. At least that's how I've read it happening, or that's how it's been explained to me in some podcasts that I've followed. Phantoms and Monsters Radio is one that I really got into researching time slips on. They cover a lot of that. I don't want to get his name wrong. Phantom and Monsters Radio is a good YouTube channel. Lon Strickler is his name. He did a lot of studying on the Chicago Mothman, which that'll be something else we'll cover one day. But it's The time slips are definitely something that piques my interest here. Wu has a question. If the person jumps back to the 1930s, say, would that past be the same or change because the person went back in time? People could bet on sports, etc., and have great collectibles. So, this is where it gets really complicated. We have our movie version, Back to the Future type of time travel, which does have its plot holes in somewhat. Like, you could poke holes into it. And I could jump all over with this, but I do want to explain and spend some time on this. The Back to the Future time travel, to my understand, like the way that it's explained, if it were ever to be possible, in their version, in the movie version, the only current, like, Marty, like, that we're watching, that's him living through all of this stuff. Like, we're only experiencing it from his perspective. And Doc Brown says time changes around the other people. And I think there's some truth to that with these time slips, where I think it's locked in. Like, you're not able to, like, or you're not going to change anything. These people in the past saw future you there already, and you're just, like, fulfilling something that was gonna happen anyway. But then you have to bring into account, like, what if you just chose not to go by the ley line that day and you don't end up time slipping? There's that part too. Whereas it comes into, like, free will and choice too. Like, do we have a choice? Is this avoidable? Can we go into a time slip, like, willingly? Can we manifest something like that if we seek it out? Gettysburg has a lot of these that happen. I'm a Civil War reenactor myself. I've been doing that since 2017, so 8 years now. Next month, 8 years. And Gettysburg has had sightings of what they thought that were reenactors walking along the side of the road. And here come find out there's no reenactments that day, and there's nobody walking around in reenactment uniforms anywhere. So these people are actually seeing soldiers from that time in Gettysburg, and they have that fog that passes over. So it has the element of water to it because of the fog, and I guess humidity plays a role. There's just too many questions with it. But this is the stuff that I think about when we talk about time slips. And, no, it's a real good question. All right, Wu is suggesting to watch Atlas Shrugged. I've heard of this. Yeah, it jumbles my head thinking about all of this because you really want to understand what the ramifications are. It's like if you walk a different direction on, like, your morning routine and you end up missing a car accident or something, like, is there an alternate reality where you did your normal routine and you ended up getting hit by a car or something? I don't know. I don't like the idea that there's, like, an infinite amount of versions of ourselves living in all these different timelines and realities. And, like, Marvel went and explored that with the multiverse stuff. But, like, I don't know. I would like to think that this is it. There's no really like all of this that we're living is not erasable. Like this is all tangible. It cannot be undone. So then when we get to the topic of time travel is different than time slips. And time travel, I think you could only go forward. I don't think you can go backward. But at the same time, time is all happening at the same time. So what we consider the past is it was also the present at one point, and it's all one continuous now. So that's supporting evidence of like the time slips being possible, almost like a veil being lifted, and then all the participants from the different eras, if they're at the same location, would be able to see each other. Does that make sense? I really think I explained it well. Like, it's like a veil, and if it passes over, all the players on the map, no matter what time they played, are able to see each other. Like a video game. And I don't know. I don't know if we're living in an artificial construct. That's a whole other topic. But it's definitely an intelligent construct that we're in. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're trying to say, Jay. What's WRD mean? But yeah, the time slip stuff, it explains why we possibly see ghostly apparitions. I want to say that's partially mixed into it, but we are also seeing like replays. So like these hauntings might not be hauntings, they just might be replaying a previous moment in life that happened that was highly energetic, and it impressed itself onto the material. Yeah, I get deep in thought with this stuff too, so I stop talking sometimes. I'm sorry. It's just I don't always talk. But it's really the time slip thing. I think it's definitely happening here in the triangle. I I guess you could say if you parked a submarine on the floor and just watched overnight on these paved roads that are submerged, what were they saying, 3,000, 6,000 feet below sea level, below the surface of the water. I'm sure if we sat there in a submarine all night long, or if we spent like multiple times doing that, at some point you might see apparitions on that road. And who knows what kind of vehicles we would see. Because we don't know how transportation worked back in ancient times. How did they move these gigantic stones? That would take, according to today's standards, the way we transport things, like that would take a lot of heavy machinery. So it's either they used the Coral Castle method where they just made things lighter with sound vibration. And I don't know. It's a lost technology. Yeah, you guys are good in the chat. I just didn't know it's all it's I think you missed a few letters on the keyboard there, Jay. All right, let's continue. We're almost done here. We're almost done for today. And we can get back to talking about the time slips too here. I'm just going to continue so we can finish the chapter, and we'll chat after the chapter's over, so no worries. Exploratory overflights since 1968 have indicated other extraordinary and apparently man-made formations in the Bahama Banks, as well as on the bottom of... Okay, I've already read that. Okay. See, I start talking, and then I lose my spot of where I was reading. Usually I'm good with that. I had my little marker here, but I was talking for quite a while there. Okay, two airline pilots, Bob Brush and Trig Adams, on a 1968 flight in the vicinity of Andros Island, photographed a partitioned rectangle on the Andros Shelf. Divers later found the wall to be of stone, but there is no record of the original inhabitants or the later Spanish conquerors having built such constructions in that area, especially underwater. So they're saying that's well before several hundred years ago. What seems to be an underwater road or wall running along the top of an underwater cliff has been located and photographed near Caye Lobos. It is possible that the ancient road ran along the cliff when both were at sea level. Perhaps the underwater sighting of steps carved in the continental shelf off northern Puerto Rico, reported by the French naval captain Jorge Huot and Lieutenant Gerard Froberville in the Bathyscaphe Archimedes, represented simply a staircase out in a rock cliff descending to the old sea level of 12,000 years ago. Off the coast of Yucatan, Mexico, numerous road causeways have often been seen from the air. They leave the shore in straight lines toward unknown underwater locations farther out at sea in deeper waters. While connecting causeways on land are invisible because of the covering jungle, those underwater are still discernible from time to time as they are uncovered by currents or storms. What appeared to be an enormous underwater road or pavement that had previously been above water was observed from the deep-diving submarine Illuminaut on a 1967 mission off Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. Man, I really threw us off today reading. I will make sure this doesn't happen next week. But, rereading some of this is good to, absorb more of the information. The road was apparently formed of or paved with manganese oxide. When special wheels were installed on an Illuminaut, it was able to proceed along the road, which in some places reached a depth of 3,000 feet, as if the Illuminaut were a car driving along a normal road, except that the road was, in this case, at the bottom of the sea. The size of the paved surface was too large to suggest the conclusion that it had been man-made, as was also the case with a very extensive tiled section of the ocean bottom observed by Dr. Bruce Heezen of the Lamont Observatory while making a deep dive in the Bahama area. Okay, now I think we will not be repeating any more of this chapter. The rest, I think, is all brand new. Among the apparently man-made Bermuda finds, some are clearly visible, but some are apparently not underwater, but under the sea bottom itself. Under the sea bottom itself. It is a fact that stonework or stone foundations buried underground beneath the accumulation of ages, or as the result of earthquakes or flooding, will change the pattern of grass or other plant life that grows over it. This has led to some successful discoveries of the past both on land and under the sea. Vanished constructions ranging from ruined Roman camps and roads in England to ancient canal systems and city walls in what was once Babylonia and Assyria, now Iraq, and in Iran and Central Asia, entire lost cities have been traced and reconstructed from the variety of pattern and shading and plant life on the ground or in marshes or under the sea. Straight lines show in the ground cover coloration where the foundations or walls are buried or where roads or canal beds have existed. So basically what this is saying is when overgrowth took over these old cities, the overgrowth grew in a different color because of the type of stone that the roots were growing on top of. So like the oxidation made the plants darker. And so you can see a straight line in the vegetation of just dark green. And if you were to go under that, like some of these explorers and researchers did, they would find these paved carved stones that are underneath whatever was growing there. And they're saying the same thing about what they found underwater. I'm pretty sure I'm getting that right. All right, let's continue here. I'll reread two sentences here. Straight lines show in the ground cover coloration where foundations or walls are buried, or where roads or canal beds have existed. The ancient Etruscan port city of Spina in Italy had so completely vanished that it was considered legendary until the traces of its walls, foundations, canals, and wharves, WHARVES, absolutely invisible from the ground, were clearly seen from the air. The possibility of locating ancient sites from the air has been put to good use in the Bahamas, where the surrounding shelf is shallow enough to discern such traces of underwater constructions from the air. But you're not going to find it on Google Maps. You might find it on Google Earth, like what Dutchson's did. And he's a good channel to follow if you're into earthquake coverage and the tectonic plate shifts. And another shout out to Zenray for linking me to the Florida video that he did about the underwater structures that he found. It plays right into what we're talking about today here. In many places on the Bahama banks, there are amazing assortments of great squares, rectangles, crosses, long lines parallel to each other, perhaps roads, sometimes turning at right angles, concentric circles, triangles, hexagons, and other geometrical shapes, all traced by the presence or absence of seagrass over the actual ruins. Underwater tests undertaken by divers indicate that stone constructions traced by the existing bottom lines lie several feet farther down under the sand. So they're saying that there's structures that are buried under the sand, under the water. So it would be no different than like these other ancient megalith cities, like in Peru. Like they're still digging that out in Peru. Machu Picchu, they're still digging that out. And I guess it's the same with when we don't have a real good estimate of how low the water level was prior to it getting to the current point. But it must have been that low for a long time to have a civilization go there. Alright, continuing on. One may ask, with all this unusual evidence now being explored, why it was never noted before. Part of the answer is that doubtlessly it never occurred to anyone to look for a sunken civilization in the Bahama Banks, especially since so many historic sites were waiting to be found in the Mediterranean. Underwater searches in the Bahamas and the off coast of Florida have been heavily concentrated on Spanish treasure ships, certainly objects representing a more immediate financial reward than the uncovering of a forgotten and difficult to identify civilization. Even with the evidence at hand, as much effort is being spent in scientific circles to disprove the finds as by explorers and researchers to bring them to public attention. It is also to be noted that some qualified researchers are hesitant or reluctant to confront the hostile opinion of other archaeologists and oceanographers. An other element exists in that the buildings or artifacts discovered may be covered through the action of tides and storms after they have once been located and so again lost. It is remarkable, however, that since 1968, a certain rise in the bottom of the Great Bahama Bank has taken place, uncovering traces of new formations where there were none discernible in earlier photographs of the same area. This was the case of a normal formation shaped like a large arrow, built of stone and 100 feet long, between North Cat and South Cat Cays, Bimini, and another southeast of South Caicos, Caicos, pointing southeast and in due alignment to another straight bottom line, as yet unexplored. Some of the already discovered sites also seem to be rising or being cleared of sediment by tidal action so that their artificial or man-made construction is more discernible. So these cities are just showing themselves again. Dr. James Thorne, a distinguished oceanographer and diver, and decidedly neutral, if not skeptical, on the subject of lost civilizations under the sea, recently examined thick columns holding up some of the stones of the Bimini Wall, a fairly convincing refutation of opinions held by numerous other oceanographers that the whole complex at Bimini and other places in the Bahamas are natural formations. Another group of divers who had found a sunken anchor from a Spanish galleon discovered, as they examined it and scratched at the bottom around it, that it was lying on top of a mosaic floor or terrace which may have sunk thousands of years previously. So they found a sunken anchor from a Spanish galleon. And it was lying on top of a mosaic floor, which may have sunk. So, I don't know. They're saying the anchor may have sunk, but it sunk and fell on a floor. That's nuts. That's like, if the water level were to rise again now, and like all of the continents are just underwater, and everyone's traveling on boats now. You're only on the water now. You drop an anchor down just to chill out for a bit. You drop the anchor, it might drop down into someone's house. Like, that's what we're talking about here with this. It's an anchor around a mosaic tile floor. And now that anchor is from later on, obviously, but just a little perspective with that. And I don't think the water level is going to go up anymore. Yeah, I mean, it may, but I don't think it will. There has to be a balance. Like, I could see it going down and up and down and up like that, but I don't ever see it going like up and up and up and up and up and up, because then like how there's not gonna be like sea life left if that were to happen. It'd be very difficult for everyone else, every other living thing on this planet, if we had more water, if the water levels rose. It's it's a lot to think about. Is this an enclosed system? Do we have water that is coming up from the crust that's constantly, or sometimes it fills if the earthquakes are violent enough to get more water added? Like, I don't know. Do we lose water with earthquakes? Nothing significant, but probably. All right, continuing on. Every time traces of a sunken civilization are found in the Atlantic or elsewhere, a series of press and magazine articles as well as books customarily identify it with the, quote, lost, end quote, continent of Atlantis. Atlantis, whose image has bemused mankind since antiquity, was described in considerable detail by Plato in his Timaeus and Critias dialogues as the land of the golden age of man, a great and wonderful world empire in the Atlantic, which with, quote, violent earthquakes and floods, in a single day and night of rain, sunk beneath the sea. And that this is the reason why the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, unquote. So are they saying that it's just the depth is too much, that it's impossible to pass through because of how wavy the water is in that region due to all of that activity with the plates? Alright, continuing on. Atlantis has naturally enough been identified with the Bahama underwater ruins. Although Plato, as antiquity's most famous commentator on Atlantis, seems to have located it in front of the columns of Hercules. It's spelled different here. Heracles. But in parentheses it says Hercules. Hercules. Now known as the Straits of Gibraltar, somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean. So the columns of Hercules are now known as the Straits of Gibraltar. A close reading of Plato's account, however, will disclose a most interesting piece of information suggesting that the Atlantean Empire was no one island, but a series of large islands in the Atlantic whose rule had spread to both sides of the ocean. In those days, approximately 11,500 years ago, the Atlantic was navigable, and there was an island situated in front of the straits, which you call the columns of Heracles. That's the different variation spelling of Hercules. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together, and was the only way to other islands, and from the islands you might pass through the whole of the opposite continent which surrounds the true ocean. For this sea which is within the straits of Heracles, the Mediterranean, is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance, but that other is the real sea, and the surrounding land may be most truly called a continent. It will be noted that Plato mentioned Libya, meaning Africa, and Asia, but specifically and separately designates the continent, that is, the continent in the west, which he previously mentioned as being an area of Atlantean rule. The underwater complexes at Bimini and other points in the Bahamas have been attributed to all sorts of early ocean voyagers: Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Minoan Greeks, Mayas, Egyptians, and as a final resort, as their age becomes more obvious, the Atlanteans. It is fairly sure, however, that no race within our recorded history built them, and doubly sure that they were not built underwater. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. All of these structures that we're finding underwater, they were not underwater when they were built. Plato's reference to a continent on the other side of the, quote, true ocean, end quote, has often been cited as a proof that ancient records conserved an awareness of North America, and that this memory served as an inspiration and encouragement to Columbus, who, it is reported, carried with him a map showing Atlantis and the lands beyond. We were never told this in school. Right. Columbus had a map of the Atlantis continent with lands beyond it. Plato's account has a direct bearing on the possibility of Atlantean, used here in the sense of an Atlantic Ocean empire, presence in the extreme western part of the Atlantic Ocean. This would include the present islands of the Great Bahama Banks, when large areas of the banks were well above water, with the deepest present oceanic features such as the tongue of the ocean and the Straits of Florida forming an inland bay and a sea barrier from the Florida coastline, which also extended much farther out to sea. Circular declivities on the sea bottom, 14 miles off the Florida Keys, and 500 feet down or deep from the surrounding sea bottom, which is almost 1,000 feet deep in that area, charted by the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, has been assessed as freshwater lakes covered by the sea at the time of the last rising of the ocean or sinking of the coastal lands. Wow. So you see what they're saying there? Let's get this photograph a little bigger here. They're saying that the Florida Keys acted as a sea barrier, and that they also said that Florida went further west into the... Was all of this mostly landmass? They said that the Florida Keys were a barrier to the ocean, and that there was fresh water behind it. So how far does this go? We'll have to look at Google Earth. Like, you know, I'm gonna download that, and maybe we'll do that for, like, after we're done with this book. Like, we'll do a proper looking into this. Because I want to see how far the Keys actually go through here. And Dutch Sin's channel on YouTube, actually, they did a good job showing us, like, basically they're old star forts that are underwater by the Florida Keys. So these freshwater lakes were covered by the sea at the time of the last rising of the ocean or sinking of the coastal lands. I'd say the rising rather than the sinking. I don't know how sinking would even come into play. But we'd need a lot of water to flood and sink all these, like, quote, sink continents. You have to add a lot of water in order to do that. That's why I was saying maybe the earthquakes are adding water. We just had a giant, like, let's just hypothetically say we had a giant earthquake that opened up, released a bunch more water into the realm here. I don't know. That's where my mind is tending to go towards right now. All right, continuing on. A look at the present depth table of the Western Atlantic presents a clear indication that if the sea level were lowered 600 to 800 feet, great islands would exist in the Atlantic where there are now small ones. I'd say that. I'd say so. And it is of particular interest, or it is of peculiar interest to recollect that this rising of the waters took place between 11,000 and 12,000 years ago, coinciding with the account Plato reputedly received through Solon from Egyptian priests at Sais, whose written records antedated those of the Greeks by thousands of years. Atlantis, through the course of the years, has been, quote, located, end quote, in a number of different parts of the world. Under the Atlantic Ocean, the Aegean, Caspian, and North Seas, Western Africa, Spain, Tunisia, Germany, Sweden, the Sahara, Arabia, Mexico, Yucatan, Venezuela, the Azores, Canary, and Madeira Islands, Brazil, Ireland, Ceylon, Ceylon, and even under the Indian Ocean, often depending on the nationality, and one may say the Welton Shong of the writer or investigator. And I have no idea what that word means. We gotta look this up real quick. Schauung. Whoa! This is a brand new word we're learning today here. So Weltanschauung is worldview. A worldview, or Weltanschauung, is said to be a fundamental cognitive orientation of an individual or society encompassing the whole of the individual's or society's knowledge, culture, and point of view. However, when two parties view the same real-world phenomenon, their worldviews may differ, one including elements that the other does not. So this brings up another topic of, I mean, this comes up even in the paranormal circles, that, like, people see things that are meant, like, just for them to see. They could be with a group of people and the whole other group of people don't see what they see. And it could just be that if it's an intelligent entity communicating, showing themselves, they could just be showing them to a certain person that has a certain materium vibration. I don't know what you would call it. I don't know. It's... So we got a new word, all right? Weltanschauung, the worldview of the writer or investigator. The candidacy of the western part of the Bermuda Triangle as a location for Atlantis has been popularized since 1968 discoveries by a most unusual set of circumstances. tied in with the very year of their discovery. These concern the prophecies of Edgar Cayce, the quote, sleeping prophet, end quote, and psychic healer who died in Virginia in 1945, but whose, quote, readings, end quote, a term used for interviews given while Cayce was in a trance, have continued to influence many thousands of people. While he was still alive, he gave through his readings, advice, and counsel to more than 8,000 people, first on health problems and subsequently on a variety of other matters. The documentation of his remarkable cures and telepathic powers need not be recounted here, except for what may prove to be history's most unusual archaeological predictions, which directly concern Atlantis and Bimini. Between the years of 1923 to 1944, Edgar Cayce gave hundreds of trance interviews about Atlantis, relating to people who, in his opinion, and that those of who have carried on his work in the Association for Research and Enlightenment, lived in Atlantis during a former life. When he was not in a trance, Cayce was either unaware or uninterested in the question of Atlantis and often expressed a certain perplexity that he had mentioned it in so many readings. However, in June 1940, in connection with numerous other previous observations about Atlantis having existed in the area of Bimini, referred to by Cayce as Poseidia, he unexpectedly declared, Poseidia will be among the first portions of Atlantis to rise again, expected in 68 and 69, not so far away. Yeah, well, that never happened, did it? This curious archaeological prophecy was fulfilled almost on schedule with the numerous finds in the Bahama Banks. Oh, okay. Here I thought it never happened, and then they had the discoveries of the Bahama Banks. See, we are all fallible here. The uncovering by the tides of some constructions and a rise in the bottom of certain areas. One is tempted, however, to wonder whether these discoveries were made as foretold by the prophecies or because of the prophecies, or because those who had read Cayce were searching for them, as was the case with some of the pilots who cited the first underwater formations or constructions. Yeah, well, if you're looking for the stuff, you're going to find it. As can be expected, the discoveries of the underwater complexes in 1968 and thereafter, as foretold 28 years previously, have caused many people to examine Cayce's other references to Atlantis and the area with renewed interest. If Cayce's readings and ancient legends were based on memories of actual occurrences, one might envisage the possibility of forces developed by former scientifically advanced civilization being, in part, operative within the area where they were once concentrated, and consider the possibility that the electronic, magnetic, and gravitational aberrations of the Bermuda Triangle may be a legacy, albeit a negative one, from a culture so far back in time that almost no traces remain, and our memories of it are more instinctive than concrete. We have one etching here. I'll read the caption before I show it. It says, undersea elevation of Western Atlantic Ocean bottom, showing deepest areas as the darkest. Mountains in the center show Bermuda on the Great Plateau called the Bermuda Rise. The deep area to the west is the Hatteras Abysmal Plain, and to the south, the Nares Abysmal Plain. Or Abyssal. I'm sorry. So it's the Hatteras, Hatteras, Abyssal, Abyssal, and then Nares, Nares. The boundaries of the Sargasso Sea may be followed starting from the Nares Deep up through the Hatteras Deep, turning east at the northern part of the Bermuda Rise and south as it approaches the mid-Atlantic Ridge, and then west again back to the Nares Plain. So it like forms a giant C pattern. It's like a C, but it runs like that. With the deepest part being that C formation there. Off the coast of the United States, this is all one caption, by the way. Off the coast of the United States, two great river canyons, now underwater, may be seen continuing from the Hudson and Delaware rivers out under the sea through canyons made in the continental shelf. The continental shelf of the American continent and the shelves of the Antilles and the Bahama Islands, the plateau around the Bermuda, and the high mountains and plateaus beginning at the extreme right of the map were all presumably above water before the end of the last glaciation and would have given the western Atlantic a totally different shape about 12,000 years ago. So here's this photo, or it's like a drawing. Let's see here. And this is just showing the depth of all of that area. And this is actually, we're looking at the entire east coast of the United States, with Florida being right here. So that we're seeing the whole continental shelf. And that there's something right there. What is that? Okay, everybody. That's going to be it for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Next week, Thursday, we will be starting Chapter 8, titled The Surprises of Prehistory. So, that will be fun. And I believe that's going to be the last part of this. And this is going to be covering everything that was being discovered at the time. And you know what? This is such a long chapter. It goes from 36 to 71. So this might be broken down into 3. So the next 3 weeks we might be reading Chapter 8. Just because of all the content in here. We got these old ancient Egyptian glider planes that we're going to take a look at. We got more of the Azores maps in here. Yeah, we're going to be covering a lot. And then we got Chapter 9 as the final chapter of the book. And that title is The Watchers, Protectors, Raiders, or Indifferent Observers. And that could be about the unidentified flying objects. So that's it for today. Chapter 7 is now complete. Next week we will be doing Chapter 8. We are that far through the book. A lot of really interesting stuff in here. So, again, this book was used as research to make this book. And this book we will be doing a new deep dive on soon. And it'll most likely be Fridays at the day after we do these on Thursdays. Alright? And another reminder for Saturday, 11 a.m., we're doing our next deep dive, part 6, I believe, into the 1900s Chicago film industry. It wasn't long, but it was very active, and I don't know, we're going to find out if it went out with a bang, but it might have gone out with a whimper if everyone just dispersed. It's a story we don't hear about, but the film industry was started by Chicago, or the people that resided here. All right, everybody. This is it for today. Saturday, 11 a.m. I'll see you here again. And next week, maybe next week, we'll start this. I have these other deep dives I wanted to do, but this one is sticking out to me now. I have a few others I want to do. So I'll be, like, we got Gravity Hills we need to cover. We got a few others that are kind of related to this with the Bermuda Triangle. But that'll be for another time. We'll get through all of this slowly and surely, consistently. So I appreciate you all being here. And yeah, until the next one. Class dismissed.